Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome again to Marquette University Law School, Eckstein Hall. I'm Mike Goucher, and this is On the Issues. This is our continuing series of conversations with news and policymakers, people who are doing interesting, important work in this region and beyond. Today, we're going to be talking about the state budget, which is now entering a very important phase. The Joint Finance Committee will begin work on the budget next week, reshaping the document, the governor's proposal. So we'll be talking about that today with the two leaders of their respective parties in the state Senate. Seated immediately to my left is Senator Scott Fitzgerald, who is the Republican from Juneau, and he is the Senate Majority Leader, I should say, and the Senate Minority Leader is Senator Jen Shilling from La Crosse, the Democrat. So please welcome them to Marquette University Law School. We have a lot to talk about today, but I thought I'd begin by having each of our senators sort of present, from their point of view, the policy priorities contained in this budget that's currently being worked on. And Senator Fitzgerald, I'll begin with you because your party's in control of both houses of the legislature. What are the priorities? What are the challenges in this budget?
Well, after being through many budgets over the years, first and foremost, I think most of them are driven by the amount of revenue that's available to that legislature, no matter who's in control. We have the process of the Finance Committee, which we've relied on for many years, both sides of the aisle, and I think it's always served us very well. Governors put out documents that oftentimes are political statements or include a lot of policy changes or reforms. But you always know that with their timeline, which is typically right around mid-February, Valentine's Day, when they introduce their document, that they don't have a full picture of where the state will be from a revenue perspective, where the members of the Finance Committee certainly have that advantage. And this budget that we're considering right now is no different than any other in that regard. We will definitely have a little bit better picture of not only sales, income tax, but corporate tax collections. We'll just have a better picture of that. Probably in early May is when we'll get those numbers from the nonpartisan Fiscal Bureau. And as a result of that, the co-chairs of the committee will work with leadership to develop kind of the strategies related to that. So, I mean, from the perspective of this budget or any budget, that's kind of the timeline and certainly drives a lot of the policy decisions that are made. And I'll just tell you, what's under consideration is certainly K-12 education, which has always been a priority for the legislature. Something that always, I think, drives a segment of any state budget. And then after that, a segregated fund transportation is receiving a lot of discussion and a lot of debate in where we should go with that. And then finally, in this budget, the changes to the UW system. And that's always, that's an interesting dynamic that exists between the state legislature and the regents. And certainly, I think the relationship between a fairly small percentage of the state's population. The UW system itself affects only about 17% of all state residents, either because they attended a UW campus or they have a son or daughter or grandchild that's attended them. So it's not always when you're in the district, from my perspective, it's not always the first thing that comes up, but certainly everyone has an opinion on the UW system. So.
We'll talk about each of those items that you mentioned, but yeah. I'll give you a chance here, Senator Shilling, from the Democrats' perspective. What are your policy priorities? What do you hope to accomplish with this budget, given the fact that you're in the minority in both houses of the legislature? And what are the challenges in this budget?
Well, the challenges are really that $2.2 billion deficit that's really been self-inflicted with some decisions that were made in previous budgets and looking ahead. You know, you mentioned I live in La Crosse. I represent Western Wisconsin. We only have to look across the river to see the success that Minnesota has had over the last 4 years. And really 4 years ago, we were in a very similar position as Minnesota. Different decisions were made, different directions were taken. And now Wisconsin is looking at a $2.2 billion deficit. Minnesota has a nearly $2 billion surplus. They have a better job climate. They have better wages. They were investing in schools. They have made decisions to lift up wages in Minnesota, and we continue to be sluggish with our job numbers here. We continue to be, I think, ranked 40th last I saw in some of the reports for those job numbers. That we just have not, we've been stuck in neutral. And as we look at this budget, choices and priorities and values that people have in Wisconsin, it certainly is public education. And it's those urban districts, it's rural schools, those small school districts, many that I represent and my colleagues and Senate Republicans represent as well, that they are looking for some relief with these cuts. The university system. Representing a campus community like La Crosse. I will say I was pleasantly surprised recently when we had Ag Day in the Capitol, and I had cranberry growers come in to talk to me about Ag Day. And I can kind of tick off the list that they will talk to me about of their agenda for agriculture in their state, but they talked about university, the UW Extension, and what Discovery Farms means, and research development, and that technical assistance. So while the cranberry growers in Monroe County may not live in the shadow of a campus, those farmers, those communities are still reaping the benefit and the important value of a university system. So certainly looking at that UW cut. Healthcare as well. We have this opportunity to take federal dollars for expansion of Medicaid dollars here in this state. That would help us with, I think, $350 million in this budget. That would free up. Then we wouldn't have to be talking about $300 million cuts to the university system. I've heard a lot of concerns about long-term care as well, and I think many of our colleagues, regardless of where you are in the political spectrum, we're doing listening sessions both with the Finance Committee, but our own listening sessions in our districts. And so long-term care, helping our most vulnerable citizens in the state. 55,000 folks are enrolled in the IRIS program, which is helping people with disabilities, elderly people, youth, allow them to have choices on health, on their care. And the proposal that came forward really, I think, surprised many of them. It caught them off guard because not even the Secretary of Health and Human Services was kind of able to answer questions when she was before the Finance Committee, that we need to make sure if we are doing these changes that we need to have those folks at the table. If it's the caregivers, if it's the providers, we need to make sure that we are helping to, I don't want to cut the university system $300 million. We need to mitigate that because that the university system is the idea engine. It's that economic engine here in the state. We need to make sure that the university is strong. We need to make sure that our public schools are strong, regardless if they've got a small enrollment of kids in a rural district or our larger school districts. So we certainly are going to be taking a look at those areas. Transportation also was early an issue that when I became the minority leader in January that I wanted to offer where we could do the heavy lifting with both parties because, the roads may have a right lane and a left lane, but we're both using those lanes. And so we need to make sure that it's not a partisan issue. We're looking at infrastructure around this state so that we can get our goods to market. It helps with tourism. It helps with a whole lot of areas. So I hope that we can find some forward-thinking resolutions on transportation as well.
Let me ask you each, before we get into the specifics of the budget, do you see the opportunity for any common ground in this budget?
I do. I think it's always a surprise 90% of all the bills that pass through the state Senate are bipartisan or voice voted. It's just the high-profile ones that garner the media attention. So I think that's always kind of surprising to people. And I remember when I was in the minority, certainly there were a number of issues that would come up, whether it's telecommunications or transportation or stuff related to the infrastructure. I mean, there's a real willingness to work in a bipartisan fashion to craft things that make sense for everybody. And even though the legislative districts all have lines, we share constituencies, school districts, counties. So there's a lot of that goes on at the Capitol that I think is certainly unreported. And, gridlock in D.C. is gridlock. I don't see that same type of gridlock in Madison, and I haven't for some time.
Any chance for? common ground?
No, I think many of the issues that we both talked about kind of in our opening statement, that we have concerns where the governor has proposed that, and that we'd like to see some changes, and making sure that we are protecting the taxpayers, but we are being responsible in what we need to do. And, you know, before I came here, I was in the Capitol today, and a coffee mug on my desk, it says, you know, Wisconsin, where people are at strength. That's kind of a motto I've seen in the Senate. I see it on some of the letterhead and in some of our bulletin boards, where people are our strength. And that is what I think we need to keep in mind as we go through this budget.
Well, let's talk about some of the specifics of the budget. And this is Governor Walker's budget. We should state that for the record, first of all.
Yep.
And so one thing that you both mentioned was public education, K through 12 public education. First year of this proposed budget, $127 million in cuts to K through 12 education. A lot of talk on this during the public hearings. Where does that stand right now? Senator Fitzgerald, do you see a willingness to try and address that if you do have revenues that are a bit higher and better than projected?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's not only a priority for the Senate, but I think I can say it's also a priority for the Assembly Republicans to make sure that that first year is funded. And then in the second year...
So you get rid of the cuts.
Get rid of the $127 million cut in the first year. And in the second year, I think there's actually a willingness, if the revenue's there, to do an increase in the per pupil amount. I don't know what that will look like at this point, but once again, I think it's something that's always there. It's always something that both caucuses have supported. And I think the Finance Committee will probably take some unanimous votes, and that'll be early on in the process to fund K-12 education.
How does that strike you?
Well, I hope we do education early on. I had served on the Finance Committee for the last 3 budgets, and it seemed that education seemed to be at the end of the process, where you kind of see how much money is left over, and then you can figure out what the schools will get. If we have an uptick in our revenue numbers, and we'll know that, I think, May or so, I mean, I have been heartened that there has been agreement that we need to take a look at the schools and the cuts to our schools. And the school districts, and I've been meeting with school boards, superintendents, others that are really frustrated with the cuts to the schools and what it means to them. And really, they are having to make, you know, not easy decisions about, do we have a tutor, a reading tutor, or a school counselor in our school, because we just can't fund both. And so I am hopeful that we can do away that 0 in the first year for the per pupil, that we can look at restoring that and help our schools in that per pupil budget.
I want to talk about transportation. We'll get to the UW system here in just a moment, but I want to talk about transportation. You say you get a lot of inquiries about transportation. I think all of us, you know, because we use the roads and the highways and the bridges and whatever, we're concerned. And the governor has tried to address the transportation needs of the state through bonding, $1.3 billion in bonding. I talked to a number of people in your party who didn't like that. They just thought that was too much money, too much bonding. They'd like to see something that's a bit more of a long-term, permanent solution to our funding needs. Are we going to see anything like that in the product coming from the Joint Finance Committee?
This is going to be a tough one. It's going to be a tough one for, I think, some of the Republicans that in the past have kind of veered away from the idea that they would support any type of gas tax increase. Right. So I can tell you within my caucus, there is no core group that will necessarily say, yeah, I'm ready to vote for a dime gas tax increase or something along those lines.
There are other states in the area, in the Midwest, doing that.
Iowa just passed a dime gas tax increase. And the philosophy, they have a split legislature, by the way, but the idea is, gas prices have come down. Right. This is an opportunity
for
us.
Do it now.
Yeah, but I have some members of my caucus that have just the opposite take on that, saying, wait a minute, we're finally seeing that there's some money available, discretionary money available for families. Why is this a good time to tax people more? So it clearly is a very difficult area for, I think, our caucus. The other thing would be there's kind of this idea that within transportation that our priorities have been misguided, that we've got the majors going on, and certainly, what you're seeing with the zoo is a massive project. But in other communities outstate, they're still questioning, some of the projects that are going on. Right in my own district, Highway 26, 4 lanes to connect, northern part of Dodge County with I-94, those types of things. And people go, well, wait a minute, are we spending our money wisely.
Is it an urban versus city conflict?
I think there is part.
Yeah.
Part of that is just exactly where that falls. So, but if you really want to throw the conversation off, just bring up roundabouts.
It is amazing how worked up people get about roundabouts.
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
Yeah, if you ever get caught up in a tough situation at an office hours meeting, just bring up roundabouts.
So we won't see a dramatic expansion of roundabouts in the budget?
No. But I mean, there's a lot of things along those lines that I think there's a lot of discussion about. Now, you know, having a segregated fund and then also using general purpose revenue, GPR money, to fund some of those priorities in the transportation fund. In other words, moving dollars out of there or moving public transportation, mass transit, out of that fund over into the general fund. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about those types of moves as well, which is not typically something that we have dealt with in the past.
I was going to say, it sounds like you're going to have to do something, though, in terms of bonding. Maybe just not $1.3 billion?
That's the problem. For every 17 cents in every dollar that's spent on transportation in Wisconsin, 17 cents is going towards debt service. And this would take that somewhere between 21, 22, 23 cents. That's why my members are very nervous about that. They're saying, wait a minute, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot when it comes to transportation. We need to figure a better way out of this. So I think we'll be creative. This may be that type of topic that we deal with within a 2-year frame, not being able to really go beyond that. But we'll get there. We'll figure something out.
Senator Shilling, this has been an ongoing discussion. How do we pay for our transportation needs? What's the Democratic position on this right now? What do we do to address long-term transportation?
And we are having that conversation in our caucus as well, that there are some individuals who maybe lean towards one solution and others that, you know, feel that that's not one that would be popular in the district that they represent. But I think going back to late last fall, Secretary Gottlieb put forward a report that he had, a thoughtful report about how to resolve some of this and look at some new revenue streams. And maybe we need to take a look at that through the finance process and, you know, take a look at, I think he was, you know, raising some of the registration
fees.
You know, when I was in the assembly several years ago, we did away with that automatic gas indexing. And being a border community, we have a lot of people that come in from Minnesota, so they're helping pay for our gas. So people who are coming through from Illinois, Minnesota, Iowa, I mean, that they are all helping to contribute to the infrastructure. Recognizing the majors that we do have going on. During some of my listening sessions, folks are saying, our infrastructure is crumbling. It's the bridges, it's the roads. We have concerns with weight limits in rural Wisconsin, that we want to make sure that we have the infrastructure that we need and kind of the pot of money that the rural communities can use in towns. 25% of that is going to debt service. They were concerned about that. And so certainly we do need to take a look at what we are doing, but we can't continue to kick the can down the road. And I think it is causing bipartisan heartburn with the level of bonding in this budget.
Do you share his concern about, as he just laid out, the concerns of his caucus about the long-term debt issue that goes along with this borrowing of money?
Yes.
Yeah. You do share that.
Let's not let Congress and the feds off the hook on this either. There's been less and less money available, not just for Wisconsin, but every state throughout the nation. So I almost kind of grin when I hear some congressmen talk about we need to address the crumbling, specifically bridge situation that exists nationwide, because there's less and less revenue for the states. And we've been trying to make that up. So let's not let Congress and the feds off the hook on this issue.
I'm going to ask this next question first to Senator Shilling, and it's about the UW budget cuts that the governor has proposed, $300 million in the biennium. And many people in the UW system, many of the leadership at the campuses around the state have said that this is just makes their lives extremely difficult, that this will have long-term ramifications, that at UW-Madison we could lose talented faculty, that this has a serious impact on the quality of education in this state. Do you agree with that assessment, or are folks overstating the impact of these cuts?
I do agree with the concerns, and I have 2 boys who are kindergarten and 4th grade, so I think maybe it'd be I can't do the math quick, but like 2027, 2030, they hopefully be graduating from a university school. And I want the system to be a strong, healthy school, a strong, healthy system. And we are seeing that candidates who are looking to apply for jobs or be offered positions within the university, 2 of them I think were recently just made in the press, that they said thank you but no thank you, that we are concerned about the direction of long-term funding and support for the university system. So we are seeing top faculty and opportunities that research and development dollars that they bring, that we could be losing that. Many of the universities are saying we would like some flexibility on tuition, and I think the Board of Regents this week, putting something forward yesterday, voting on something today about looking at tuition for out-of-state and graduate and professional, and so this is $300 million is really tough, and I think it is too deep. Schools are looking at buying out. UW-Eau Claire is looking at buying out 325 positions of faculty and staff, and to imagine that education experience on that campus with 300 less staff, I mean, that's pretty alarming. And so we want to have, allow the leadership within the system to do the right thing and keep a healthy, strong system that has that reputation nationally, and we don't want to diminish that.
Along with the cuts, and it's important to point this out, the governor says there will be greater autonomy, at least under his proposal, for the university, and this will allow them flexibility that could result in savings. In fact, I think President Ray Cross, the president of UW Extension, said it could be $15, $25 million a year in savings from that. How do you feel about that other part of the proposal, which is to give the UW greater autonomy?
Well, and it seems like there has been some concern that the autonomy as proposed in the budget, that there just isn't the support there with many of colleagues on the Finance Committee. So I think maybe that authority as proposed is probably not going to go through, but looking at other ways that there can be cost savings, or in the last budget there were some flexibilities that were given to them. But I think it's, again, having that conversation, having UW system at the table, because President Cross came forward with a very thoughtful $93 million ask of the of the legislature in talent and development when he introduced his budget. And then to realize a $300 million cut was sort of the response. He has been in the Capitol a lot. I have seen him in the halls, working those offices, talking to legislators, and I think that communication is very helpful, because there still is some healing that needs to be done with UW system and with legislators because of some past issues, in the past about how things had happened and kind of dealt with on a PR standpoint. So I think continuing to build those relationships, talk with those legislators, and earn some of that trust back and going forward to make sure that we can maintain a strong system.
Majority Leader Fitzgerald, where do we stand on the issue of autonomy? Senator Shilling says there are some people in the Republican caucus in particular who don't seem very enthusiastic about it as it's sort of described now. Also, what about $300 million in cuts? Well, where do we stand on that?
You got to go back to last biennium, and the backdrop was when the discovery was made that there was about $1 billion just kind of squirreled away by the UW system, and they at the same time were asking for another tuition increase. When that discovery was made, I think it was not only off-putting to many legislators, but certainly, fueled the idea that we need a tuition freeze, at least temporarily. And that's in place. After we got a little more detail, we saw that from campus to campus, it was a much different situation. Some of the smaller campuses did not have the reserves that UW-Madison had, and some mid-range universities did have different approaches. So that's kind of the backdrop. So you fast forward to now, and the $300 million reduction, $90 million of that is specifically UW-Madison. There is a different range on how this will affect each campus. And then there are some of my colleagues, in fact, that are saying, we are now in a situation where we either have to have more control. So when you talk about, let's say, procurement, that's a flexibility right now that does not exist for a chancellor because it's controlled at the UW system level. If we can get those to match up, there probably is some savings long range. But it's not as simple as just, we want $300 million out of the UW system. This is very complex, and we've always had a love-hate relationship, the legislature, with not only the UW system, I think, but with the regents.
Why do you think that is?
I think because we all know that it's an economic engine that certainly makes this state move forward. It's a model system that many other states would love to have. But at the same time, we have this set of regents that always, we consider after they've been there a while, they go native and they become part of the system. So that's why I have some colleagues right now when you talk about autonomy that are saying, I'm not giving up the reins, not as long as they still are asking the budget committee to put in X amount of revenue to continue to support the system. So it cuts both ways. I think if you give them certain autonomies, you're going to want to verify that there is cost savings associated with that. But I also have some members that just are not willing to allow the UW to just go off on their own because they don't trust them. They need to build that trust back. And I think last session, a lot of that was kind of undermined by the idea that they were raising tuition on students at the same time they had $1 billion in reserve.
Do you think at the end of the day the number comes down from 300 to 200 or 150, or do you think it'll probably remain fairly close to 300?
I wish there wasn't a cut at all. I wish we didn't have to talk about a cut. And I think if there were different choices, we wouldn't have to do that. Does 200 million feel like a victory? I don't know. I think President Cross is hopeful that he's kind of on the right track, making conversations, making his case and his pitch to reduce that cut. But still, those cuts will be fairly deep on some of these smaller universities still. And if it's a Parkside or a Superior, UW La Crosse, I mean, a cut will be difficult because they have continued to be in this cycle where in the past they would boldly say that we are, state support, we're state funded, the university is. Then they say, well, we're state funded instead of being state supported, we're state funded. Well, they're hoping to be state located, right? I mean, with these cuts that are coming, that they're like, there are things that we could, we could lose these campuses. So I hope that we mitigate these cuts, but I wish we didn't have to talk about these cuts at all.
Some chancellors have already said publicly, this is not that bad for our campus. And like I said, there's varying degrees on the effect that it might have. But they're looking at kind of what's been the increase in costs associated with that university compared to the amount of new freshmen that are coming in. They're controlling their enrollment. So I wouldn't say, I don't want to leave the impression that every chancellor out there is saying, oh my gosh, this is something we can't survive. That is not the case. Some of them have said, no, we'll be fine. We just ultimately need to keep talking and keep communicating on this.
Can I ask each of you one more question on this subject? Does the state need to have a conversation about whether it can afford to have as many two-year campuses, whether it can afford to have a campus at UW Superior, whether it can provide the many different campus sites and educational opportunities that it currently provides? Is that a discussion the state needs to be having or should have at some point in the not too distant future?
Well, certainly the UW system, I mean, it is a gem. And those communities that are the home to a campus, it is a tremendous economic tool in that community. And for job opportunities, the students, the economic impact that the students have in those communities as well. But we look around the state, and I'm pleased that the UW Extension, we have a presence of the UW Extension in every county. I think that is important. And as I talk to, again, rural Wisconsin, that is their tie to the university, that they feel that is a tremendous benefit to their community and what they are doing in their industry or in agriculture or what they're doing. If we start this conversation, we can't implement it in a budget, in the next 6 weeks. And this is something that we need, make those cases. It is very important. As I talk to my colleague up north who represents UW Superior, what this would mean if UW Superior, closed. That is something that would be detrimental to the north. So we can have these conversations, but I think we need to be mindful about what that impact is and really the Wisconsin idea, bringing back that Wisconsin idea, what the role of the university system is beyond the boundaries of the university system, but within and beyond the state.
Senator, time for a larger conversation on this subject?
Sure. 50% of the state budget is made up of the investment we make in education, and that's UW system, tech colleges, and K-12. Those different forces kind of are pressure on each other. And Senator Shilling's right. I mean, every time a budget comes up, there's some discussion about closing either some two-year campus or, for the most part, UW Superior comes up each time. But there's kind of this, I think there's always a discussion, but nobody ultimately kind of pulls the trigger on that. I don't anticipate that that discussion will head in that direction this time around.
This is just a very quick kind of a yes or no question. At the end of the day, when this budget is passed, do you think the quality of education provided by the University of Wisconsin will be damaged by what's in this budget? Senator Fitzgerald?
I do not. No, I don't think so.
Senator Shilling?
I am cautious. I guess that's not a yes or a no, but I am really cautious about sort of the trends that we are seeing and the support that is being offered to the system and the cuts that are being asked of them.
Let's spend a couple of moments on an issue that I think is one that resonates with a number of people in this state, and it deals with the Department of Natural Resources and the DNR board. We love our wildlife, we love our forests, we love that. That's part of who we are in Wisconsin. And the governor has said that in his budget proposal that he would like to no longer have the DNR board be a policy-setting board. It would be an advisory board only, but not have the same sort of clout that it currently has. How do you feel about that? Is that a good thing for the state of Wisconsin, Senator Fitzgerald?
I guess with my leadership hat on, there doesn't seem to be a lot of support for the change that the governor wants to make right now. But I think, you know, that's what's great about a governor's budget is it kind of fuels the discussion. And a lot of time the legislature finds kind of a middle ground. I don't know that that's the case in this instance, but not only on the DNR policy change, but in other areas of the budget. I mean, that's something that certainly sets the stage for the Finance Committee to have those discussions and ultimately kind of reflect what the full caucuses feel on that. I can tell you in my own district, in the 13th district, there does not seem to be a lot of support for what the governor put in there. And we make them aware of that. I mean, we see if there's trouble on an issue like this, we reach out to the governor's office and say, you know, we don't know if we're going to be able to get there, or if we are, here's a few changes. What do you think of them? And I think that probably falls into that category right now.
Any other parts of his plans for the DNR that also don't play necessarily well with your constituents or with your caucus members' constituents?
Not necessarily a DNR, I would say, but a lot of the mergers that the governor included in his budget, I would say are kind of, as a matter of fact, two of them we're actually going to craft a separate piece of legislation, and we'll probably have a longer, protracted discussion on whether or not we think it's a good idea. And we talked to the governor's office, and they're fully on support with that idea as well. So we'll use a standing committee in the legislature to kind of have that discussion and that debate. Ultimately, I think it'll come out of the budget. Whether or not we deal with that issue later on, maybe in the fall, is still up in the air. But it's just a different way for the legislature to deal with something that the governor has kind of thrown out there in his budget.
That probably wasn't clear enough. I was talking more about the cutting of state funding, for example, for parks in the state, whether or not that's getting much of a reaction in your district.
I mean, that's another good example of something that would fall into the category of, you know, are we going to have more revenue in May than we had in February?
Okay. Let me have you weigh in on the DNR and the advisory board versus the policy-making
It's said that the governor proposes and the legislature disposes. And I hope that in this area that the legislature will dispose and change of his thoughts of making that an advisory board, both the Department of the Ag Board and the DNR board. Those are citizens boards. I think citizen input is very important, and I'm hearing a lot of pushback from my constituents on that change. I'm also hearing a lot of pushback on freezing the Knowles-Nelson Stewardship Fund. Basically 13 years until 2028 to freeze that fund, and that is opportunities to partner with landowners or local units of government to protect natural resources and pristine lands. It also helps with infrastructure for, say, the hook and bullet crowd of boat landings and things like that. So I hope we can revisit that issue as well, that people are concerned about sort of, you know, western Wisconsin, the driftless area, the bluffs, and protecting that from development and things like that, and using that that wisely for public use for generations to come. And I hope we can change what the governor has proposed there.
I saw you smile a bit there.
I am not hearing that.
Did I get you to smile?
I am not hearing that on stewardship. Oh. No.
Well, do you have a long list of things for the governor? You talked about your list. Is it a long list or a short list?
Stewardship, I think my caucus is closely aligned kind of where the governor is, which doesn't mean that you don't manage certainly the state lands that have been purchased through stewardship. But I think there's a concern about purchasing new land. I think there's been a criticism in and around the DNR, the Republican Kathy Stepp, DNR, Secretary Stepp, where some of the stewardship land is just not even being managed at this point. So I think it would be, you know, if there's something that truly is unique, then maybe there'd be an exception, but for the most part, stop buying up state land. We can't afford it anymore. It's all related to bonding and debt service.
A couple more topics that I want to get to, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. Senior care. I'll begin with you, Senator Shilling. Democrats talk a lot about this issue, this notion that maybe we would change the way people get prescription drugs. Maybe they need to get them from Medicare Part D instead of senior care. For Democrats, is that one of those sort of lines in the sand? You don't want any changes to senior care?
Well, and I think changes to senior care have been proposed in previous budgets, and it is a wildly popular program here in Wisconsin. I think 85,000 seniors are enrolled in it. It is easy for the forms to fill out and to enroll. It's very cost effective, and it's been on the chopping block before, but signatures and petitions and thousands of people lend their names to petitions that say, please don't touch senior care. The governor has proposed, I think, a $15 million cut to it, which is about 40% of the budget. I think early on that was something that the leaders of the Finance Committee, but Democrats were talking about senior care is not something that needs to, that we need to be following the governor's lead on this. If it's not broke, why do we need to fix it? And I think finance members heard that loud and clear at some of the listening sessions and the hearings that they had. So while I listen to the words of my colleagues, and they say, well, the governor's plan is not going to go forward, but I don't know what that means for the senior care. Is it going to stay as is? Will they be changing enrollment procedures, and so no new enrollees? Will they be looking at changing the fees and things that are associated with enrollment, or with premiums and copays? So while the governor's proposal may not go forward, I don't know what that quite means if they're going to keep it as is. But I think we need to rally around senior care.
Can you shed any light on that for us? What that might look like?
Yeah, the governor's proposal is more of a long-term approach. I mean, what they're hearing is a different conversation, I think, than members of the legislature here in Wisconsin are hearing. They're hearing at the federal level that eventually all states are going to have to move towards Part D because of the cost. Now, we can protect senior care one more time, and I think my members are there. I think Jen's right. The legislature
They want to do that. They're probably not going to.
Right, whether it's political will or whatever it might be. But the question is, right now it's $30 to get in. If that's raised to $100 for a senior by the Finance Committee, do they still want to be part of senior care? I've had some seniors approach me in the district, and they'll say, even if you raise it to $100, I still want to be in it. You know, well, that's a different discussion then. So it's real easy to run around and say, hey, we're going to save senior care, but at what cost? Because right now, at the $30 level, it continues to not be finding its way through a system that, you know, ultimately is going to become part of the federal system, which is Part D.
So is it possible the cost could go up as you work on this in the next couple of months?
I think it could. I mean, I think that's got to be part of the discussion. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of petitions, and it's very easy to kind of pose for holy pictures related to senior care. But in the end, we have to address kind of the finance side of it, and that has not been done yet.
I have to ask this question of both of you. I mean, Democrats time and time again say, you know, and you said it earlier, Senator Shilling, that we wouldn't have some of the challenges we face in this budget if we had taken the Medicaid expansion money. That's sort of the mantra of Democrats. You keep saying it, but the votes aren't there for it. So does there come a point where you don't say it anymore? Well,
you look at states, even with Republican governors, who maybe weren't a fan of the Affordable Care Act, but after a budget cycle or two, they're now looking at that and revisiting that issue, and they're taking that federal money to their states to help with a better bottom line for creating a health care budget in those states. And I just, that would help us tremendously. We look at that opportunity. I also have concerns. I mean, the governor is looking at expanding the voucher program. We haven't really talked about the voucher program too much, but you know, the tough funding mechanism that we have right now for our public school system, where we have over 870,000 students in our public school system, and then looking at how much time and revenue that we are spending talking about vouchers. And if we could do things differently and look at that voucher expansion to put that on hold. I know that the governor has, I think, changed some of his proposal about who would be enrolled in the voucher program, but that continues to be a concern for us who are supporting public education in this state.
Do you have anything you want to add on vouchers? And I do want to ask you about the Medicaid question, though.
It's less than 2% of all students in the state that are involved in a voucher school, yet it garners a ton of headlines. And I think I want to put that in perspective for people, because oftentimes they think, oh my gosh, all the public money is being stolen for these voucher systems. By the way, it's been wildly successful in certain schools. There's been some bad actors along the way, but all you have to do is visit go to Mesmer if you want to see an example of an awesome school choice system right now. It's fantastic. The graduation rates are fantastic. I have no regrets in being part of the expansion of school choice. When it comes to even an increase in removing the caps, I still think what you're going to see statewide is kind of a very slow migration, where maybe it'll hit 2% or 2.5% of all students in Wisconsin, but it's still a tiny, tiny portion of the kids that are involved in this plan. And I think that's kind of why our caucuses, I think, will support that, and maybe even change the funding system to put a few more bucks in there.
Okay, on Medicaid expansion, I've had one, I would say a prominent Republican say to me, deep off the record, would not say this on the record, that if it were up to him, he would have taken the Medicaid expansion money, because he said it would have allowed us to do a lot more in terms of whether it's funding schools, whether it's providing a bigger tax break. It just would have made things a lot easier, and that there are other Republican governors around the country doing this. When you go to sleep at night and nobody's around you and you're dreaming those dreams, you ever say, gee, I wish maybe we had that Medicaid expansion money?
No, Mike, I don't.
Okay, that's simple enough. Okay.
I do.
You have that dream.
I have that dream.
But I would say we watch this very closely, and I didn't even have people saying it secretly. I had senators lobbying us to take the money last session. But the one thing, I'm not going to take a victory lap on it, but look at Ohio right now, and look at what Governor Kasich is dealing with. The federal money is there. He took it. He took the money. His enrollment rolls are going through the roof right now, where he's not just dealing with Medicaid enrollees that are at the poverty level. He's about 17% above that now. They are shocked. Each month, they go back in and take a look at how many people have shifted over to Medicaid in the state of Ohio, and they're going to run out of money before the fiscal year is over, and they have no idea where they're going to come up with it. And guess what? Next year, that number will be reduced from 100% federally funded Medicaid dollars to 90%. So it's going to get worse. So I have no regrets about what our position was. We took care of those people that were indigent. We made sure that they had health care, and there are people that shifted over to the Affordable Health Care Act. We don't know what the U.S. Supreme Court's going to do, but guess what? We have people in Wisconsin that are on Obamacare and are paying the premiums. That is exactly what the Wisconsin legislature and Governor Walker envisioned, and it's working out just the way we planned right now.
I'll give you 30 seconds on this topic, and we'll move on here.
Well, again, I mean, it would make our life a lot easier. We would open up some, opportunities for, to mitigate the cuts that we are talking about. And I think there continues to be great angst in this state right now, economic angst. I think there's concerns about health care, there's concerns about our schools, there's concerns about family wages, and growing our economy and providing jobs and things like that, good sustaining jobs in Wisconsin for families and that infrastructure. It could help us deal with a lot of that angst.
I want to get to a big issue in this area, and probably a few of our media friends are saying, finally. But I want to talk about the arena. because Senator Fitzgerald, you've been intimately involved in discussions about the possibility of a new arena for downtown Milwaukee. The governor, in his budget proposal, came out with a plan would require $220 million in bonding, essentially. The money would be paid back through tax revenue collected from NBA players, from team employees. Governor says, I'm not going to be raising taxes on anybody. This is a great idea. You have said that doesn't really have support in your caucus, the governor's plan, and you've proposed something different. And the latest thing that I've seen you talk about is, what, $150 million in borrowing from the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands. So is that the number you're using? You think there'd be a support for $150 million from this other source?
Yeah, Speaker Voss and I kind of sat down after the governor's proposal came out, and I think we figured out that this was going to be a non-starter. There was just too much bonding associated with that. And then when you linked it up with the jock tax, again, a revenue stream that's kind of being proposed to grow into the future, it just seemed like it wasn't something that was going to work in the caucus. And very quickly, I started to hear from members to say, I can't support that. So we started looking for another option. The state treasurer, Matt Adamczyk, who is on the board of commissioners, said, hey, you know, right now we are sitting on about $1 billion in resources. And this is, it's very obscure, but this group makes loans to local municipalities, school districts across the state. And then the way that it works is it's at 3.75% interest. That interest comes back to the general school fund in Wisconsin. It's been there for many, many years. I know you get a glazed look on your face if I keep going.
And I'm snoring, I just woke up.
Yeah. But ultimately, it's just a flat-out loan compared to selling bonds on the market or ultimately trying to come up with some type of deal that involves private financing. I think it's a great option. The speaker thought the $150 million figure was something that he wanted to kind of sell in his caucus, and I think he got buy-in there. It will help me in my caucus, although I don't have full support for anything yet. That's what we're working with. But met with Mayor Barrett numerous times at the Capitol, in his office, met with County Exec Chris Abley, same thing, many times. We're working on it. We're continuing to kind of try and come up with something. Met with the Bucks owners numerous times to try and get their take on it. I think we can get this. And Senator Shilling said something early on about, you know, kind of Minnesota and a comparison. I'm a true believer, always have been. As Milwaukee goes, so goes the state of Wisconsin. We are so closely linked to this city and our economic achievement and expansion that if we ignore Milwaukee and if we don't continue to invest in the city, it has a direct effect on the rest of the state. And we have to continue to sell that idea to members, because if you're in Rhinelander, you're not always buying that argument, but it's true. The Twin Cities are kicking our butt right now. And as a result of that, we continue to lag behind Minnesota and other Midwestern states that have economic engines. I mean, Michigan has their problems. Illinois certainly has their problems. But we see that Minnesota is flourishing, and it's because of the Twin Cities.
I got a couple more questions, specifics I want to ask you in a moment, but I want to bring Senator Shilling in on this. How do Democrats feel about this idea, the one he just explained with the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands, or the one that Governor Walker proposed? Is that an appropriate use of public money?
I will say it's creative. It is creative, the path that Senator Fitzgerald is going down. Certainly in our caucus, there is a strong interest and a desire, that momentum, that we need to continue to invest in this region, and that this arena would be good not just for the city, not just for the county, but for the state, and that we want to continue to make Milwaukee a destination. And as we look at the moving parts of how it's paid for, we want to make sure when those job opportunities, that they're going to go to Wisconsin companies, that we want to make sure that the men and women of Wisconsin have that opportunity for employment opportunities in the surrounding areas. They look at the ancillary development around it, but also with that arena. And so I think it really will continue to put Milwaukee on the map. As I've been down here now in my new role as the minority leader quite a bit, there's a great synergy in this city, in this region. I am continually surprised and amazed and pleased with the number of cranes that I see in the sky, and really some of that new development that is going on, and the regentrification in neighborhoods and things like that. So I think that we'll still be talking about sort of the method of how we get there, but there are many in our caucus, I mean, I don't want to say most because I haven't heard everybody, but I think, because they have questions, but there is a desire to make this thing happen because we know the economic impact that it will have, and again, for generating for a lot of economic success down here.
The method of getting there, Senator Shilling referred to it. So let me ask you a couple specifics about that. The governor said 220 million. The number we're kicking around right now is 150. There's some scuttlebutt in Madison that maybe another 70 could be done if you went through the county, Milwaukee County somehow, that there might be a way to get it done to close that gap. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I got to give credit to the county exec. I mean, Chris has been wide open to any suggestions. He understands kind of what's going on in the city, and I don't claim to know all the players and all the angles, and especially with his relationship with the commercial real estate industry in Wisconsin, he understands kind of what's going on here, and he's an agent of the state. The counties are agents of the state per the Constitution, so we can work very closely with them and ask them to do certain things that we can't necessarily ask the city to do. We'll work with them. We will continue to work with them. We do need the mayor to ultimately kind of show us exactly where he's at and what they think the city can bring to the table. And I think we're getting very close to that. I hope we know something relatively soon on that, because then we can finish out the whole project. We can figure out exactly where we're at on the numbers.
Has there been any sentiment in your caucus to try to compel the city of Milwaukee and Mayor Barrett to put more money towards this project?
It's an interesting word, compel. I won't say it's gotten that far. I don't think we're in that type of situation right now. No, I think there's, and if you've seen the renderings, which I'm guessing most of you have, this is a game changer, which is a phrase overused, but this will change that whole portion of the city. So the $500 million in private investment that the Bucks want to bring as well it's just unbelievable that we have $250 million in private donations sitting on the table. If the state brings the 150, that we can't finish this off. I think we will get it done.
Speaker Voss said he's very confident a deal will get done. Are you very confident a deal will get done?
I am. We cannot afford to not get this done.
Senator Shilling?
I agree that the momentum has to be there, and I think we've continued down a good, positive discussion, a good pathway to come to a decision in a place that's good for the taxpayers, but it's also going to be great for the state and for this region.
Let's take some questions from the audience. I've got about 10 minutes here. Here are the rules that we go by every time we do this. Press down on the rim, not the ball. Keep your finger down on the rim. That way we'll be able to hear you. If you're in the back and you have a question, Ryan has the microphone. Please wait for him. And again, no speeches, just questions, and we'll get to as many of them as possible. I'm going to start right here with this gentleman in the Marquette. Is that a Marquette sweatshirt?
UW Eau Claire.
UW Eau Claire. What are you doing? You go to school here, don't you? Come on.
I do. I had the fortune of going to UW Fox Valley, which is a 2-year campus, then transferring to UW Eau Claire, and I'm currently a law student here at Marquette. So obviously being a student of the UW system, the $300 million was a lot coming from UW Eau Claire too, which has a lot of in-state people. Being that there's a tuition freeze, they can't raise tuition on state students, and you said the board is voting today on increasing on like grad students,
graduate non-resident
state students. So universities like Eau Claire, which don't have very many grad programs, we have like I think 5, and we get some Minnesotans. How do you propose universities that aren't UW-Madison make up for that money when they don't have the same amount of out-of-state students and the same amount of grad programs? Like, so you propose this cut, but how do you fix it?
Well, and I think, the chancellors are having that conversation. I mean, in La Crosse, where I'm familiar with, they're really looking at trying to grow their enrollment, and so maybe to draw in more out-of-state residents. But then you have to look at your infrastructure on campus. Do you have enough places of housing and things like that? Do you have enough classroom space and things? So I think it's a good, important question, and certainly at UW Eau Claire, and when I met with the chancellor, he put forward that, for this cut, at 325 positions that we might have to offer kind of a buyout, but we need to make sure that we stabilize so we continue to offer excellent education opportunities on our campus.
Senator?
I think I've seen two different numbers of what this vote that the regions are going to take will generate, anywhere from $60 million system-wide to $90 million. And I'm not sure why we can't get a better number than that. But ultimately, I think this would kind of soften the blow. Now, I don't know that every member of my caucus is on board with those tuition increases. But certainly, I think it would, if this happens and if it moves forward and we get the numbers on it, I think it will be, it'll change the discussion on where the legislature heads in relationship to the UW system.
Let's take some more questions. I'm going to go right here. Yeah, go ahead.
This question mostly goes to Majority Leader Fitzgerald, but you can also chime in. A couple of years ago, the state legislature lowered the income tax rates. They flattened out the income taxes. I think it was for people between $100,000 and $300,000 per year. And I'm guessing, I'm not a math major, but that led to lower revenues. And now we're facing an even bigger deficit than we were at that time. My question is, why did you do that? Yeah, and I'm trying to make it as non-political as possible, but it just seems to not make sense.
Okay. This question, I hope everybody could hear that. He's kind of soft-spoken, that some people know, some people couldn't hear it.
It's about the income tax.
Why did you lower income tax rates? Now we're facing, talk of a $2.2 billion deficit. Why did you do that, is the question.
There's a movement within, I will say it's more focused in the Assembly right now to continue to reduce or ultimately eliminate the income tax in Wisconsin. There are many other states that don't have the income tax at all, and as a result of that, I think you will continue to see kind of people push for that. Now in this environment, in this budget, we will get through this budget, and the income tax reduction that was there last time around will continue to be there. But I think that as long as the state is a high-tax state, and we remain in that category, and we have a small population base, 4.7 million people, to fund this high level of service that we had, that you're going to continue to see, as long as there's Republican majorities, especially with them expanded to 63 seats in the Assembly and 19 in the Senate, for some type of tax cut to continue to happen. Now, this time, it's personal property tax. That's the one that continues to come up as something that about half of my caucus talk about on a regular basis, saying it's time to eliminate the personal property tax. So part of it is ideology. Some of it is how far can we continue to push this and make sure that we continue to lower Wisconsin as a high-tax state.
Senator?
Well, I was going to chime in on the personal property tax, and we could get into that, but that's kind of a snoozer too. But certainly some of the communities, like the cities, they utilize that. They're like, if you're going to eliminate, if it's $300 million or something, how do you backfill that? Like, if you're going to eliminate that personal property tax, how do we make up for that? We've had frozen shared revenue and things like that. So, from my standpoint, I think my Republican colleagues have never met a tax cut they didn't like. From my standpoint, Democrats, we never met an education program that we didn't love. So, it sort of is a little opposite as far as sort of the desire to cut taxes. And I believe if you do it responsibly, if you do it targeted for middle-class families, those who really could need that tax relief, that is a helpful way to do it. But we have done, tax relief, we've seen cutting those revenues, and we've just not seen those revenues and the resources coming back in to help us with this budget deficit. And again, I think this deficit, it's been said, is sort of self-inflicted because we made these tax cuts, and the jobs and our economic turnaround has not been as quick here in the state.
One final quick question, if we can. We'll go over here. Yes, sir.
To both senators, could you elaborate a bit on why over the past 4 years Minnesota under Governor Mark Dayton has done so much better than Wisconsin?
Well, they decided to raise taxes, I think, on the wealthiest 2% or something in their state there. They have raised the minimum wage. I think that they have a good synergy with the Twin Cities there, with economic development and entrepreneurs and research and development. I think they're investing in their university systems, their schools, their infrastructure, that they have just seen. And typically they have had higher wages than in Wisconsin as well, that Wisconsin has trailed Minnesota in per capita wages. And so they made some different decisions than this administration has made the last 4 years. And I think think it has been kind of compounding over the last 4 years, and we are seeing where they are kind of jumping ahead, and we have remained neutral in some of those categories.
Majority Leader Fitzgerald?
Yeah, I alluded to it before. Twin Cities, I mean, they're just a juggernaut kind of nationwide right now, and not only retail, but residential and commercial growth. It's just unbelievable what's going on in the Twin Cities. I would say also across our sectors, which is for the most part ag, tourism, and manufacturing, but more specifically light manufacturing, in 08 and 09, the state of Wisconsin took a huge hit. We lost about 167,000 jobs statewide. Those have not come back yet.
I'm going to wrap things up there. I did want to say that this is what, your first joint appearance of this kind,
Yes,
the two of you?
it is.
I think so.
Did it go well enough that you might consider doing this again?
Maybe, would you?
Anyhow, I want to thank them, but before we do that, just a couple of things about our upcoming schedule. On the issue series, we'll continue next week on the 15th. That's Wednesday. We have Dale Ho. Dale Ho is the head of the American Civil Liberty Union's Voting Rights Project. He was involved in the lawsuit on voter ID in the state of Wisconsin, involved in a number of actions around the country. He will be here on Wednesday. On Thursday, Professor Charles Franklin will be back with me to reveal the latest results in the Marquette University Law School poll. I think I can say that some of the things we were talking about today may actually come up in that poll.
Probably.
It's possible.
Probably.
But having said that, we always appreciate your attendance. We appreciate your attention, your questions, your interest. Thanks very much for being with us, and thank you to our guests today, Senate Majority Leader Fitzgerald and Senate Minority Leader Shilling.